Royce Gracie is a certified MMA legend. The man was not only the first UFC champion and the first person to be inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame, but he was also the first person in the modern era to inspire a future generation of fighters. While Royce has been a part of MMA culture for decades, he doesn't give a lot of interviews, and even more rarely gives out real respect to opponents. But in recent interviews, podcasts with Joe Rogan and Jake Shields, he opened up about 4 fighters he truly respects. He named former rivals, friends, and one guy he never even fought. And that's where we'll start. Coming in at number 4 is Gordon Ryan. This is easily the most surprising name on the list. And not because he's outspoken, huge, or, well, controversial. It's for another reason.
He's good. He finishes everybody.
Now, if you're not aware, Ryan Gordon is widely recognized as the top no-gi grappler of his generation. He's never competed in MMA, never entered a UFC cage, and never faced Royce in public competition, but the two did train together privately. Royce has mentioned their session in multiple interviews. So while the match wasn't really a match, it was a simple sparring session between the two. For Royce, it clearly left an impression.
I don't care what people talk about Gordon Ryan. Man, the guy's awesome.
While the two were rolling, Gordon didn't go after a submission. Instead, he gave Royce space to fight back and controlled the pace. Royce remembered that Ryan avoided taking obvious openings and even acted like he didn't see some of them. Not in a mocking way, but to keep the roll respectful.
With one hand behind his back.
That detail stood out. Royce didn't describe it like a sparring session between equals. He saw it as a moment where a much younger athlete showed restraint without needing to be asked. No ego or needless posturing, just presence and respect. One of the first things Royce pointed out wasn't Gordon's technique or accomplishments. It was how often he trains. The thing is, Ryan Gordon doesn't take time off, no breaks for holidays or skip sessions when traveling. His daily routine stays the same, without interruption. Speaking to Royce, Joe Rogan called it every day and meant it literally.
That guy works out 365 days a year.
That consistency reminded him of how things were in the early Gracie days. Back then, progress came from volume. Gordon's approach isn't nostalgic. It just fits that same framework. The mindset can be described using the Japanese concept of kaizen. That word means continuous improvement with no defined endpoint. Royce brought up that appearance later. He repeated how Ryan's philosophy puts him years ahead of everyone else. But consistency and mindset are only part of it. Royce made a point to say the technique hasn't changed. A choke is still a choke. What's different is how the training gets built around it. Royce also had some words of advice to Gordon.
And I told him, keep doing it, because they'll push people.
In his view, modern jiu-jitsu runs deeper now. There is more focus on diet, more attention to rest cycles, and more emphasis on athletic preparation. That doesn't make older jiu-jitsu obsolete. It just means the baseline is higher. Ryan fits into that shift naturally. His process is methodical and physical. He tracks data and works through routines that didn't exist during Royce's era. Royce wasn't critical. Instead, he sounded impressed, both by the evolution of the sport and the discipline required to lead it. That is part of why Royce respects Gordon so deeply. In an era where many younger grapplers openly dismiss the history of the sport, Gordon makes a deliberate effort not to. Consider Keenan Cornelius, a respected black belt who played a key role in developing modern no-gi guard systems. In a past interview, he claimed that Rickson and Helio Gracie would only qualify as purple belts if judged by today's standards. That remark reflected a broader shift in how some modern competitors speak about jiu-jitsu's foundational figures. Royce never responded publicly. He saw no value in arguing about legacy. When Gordon's name comes up, the contrast is clear. Gordon still trains with Royce from time to time, asks questions, revisits older positions, and treats the past with care. Royce does not see that as nostalgia or submission to tradition. He sees it as maturity. To him, Gordon is not someone who replaced the old generation. He is someone who studied it, surpassed it, and still acknowledges what made it possible. For next fighter, we have something completely different. Coming in at number 3, it's Kimo Leopoldo. This wasn't the most technical fight of Royce's career. It wasn't the most significant on paper either. But in terms of sheer difficulty, it might have been the hardest win he ever had. There are a lot of words to describe Kimo, but I think Joe Rogan found the 3 perfect ones.
Jacked, full of juice, enormous.
Kimo entered the Ultimate Fighting Championship in 1994 with no real background in MMA or real reason to belong there. Well, except for one actually. He was unbelievably strong. The fight between him and Royce was extremely memorable due to the weight difference of the two fighters. Kimo was much bigger than the 178-pound Royce.
Like, what did Kimo weigh?
250.
And of course, because of Kimo's insane entrance into the octagon. Fun fact, since UFC discouraged theatrical entrances early on, Kimo had to smuggle the cross in parts and assemble it right before his entrance into the arena so the UFC staff wouldn't notice it. Carrying that enormous cross required a lot of strength.
Raw. He was raw. Probably one of the strongest guy I fought.
Kimo had plenty of it, of course. Royce was well aware of that. The fight was rough from the opening moment. Royce couldn't trip him, couldn't take his back. He found himself trying to muscle Kimo down rather than using his usual leverage and flow. It didn't work. Groin strikes were legal at the time, and Kimo didn't hold back. He used every ounce of his strength to resist the takedown attempts and punish Royce up close. Kimo's strength allowed him to hang with Royce, one of the best fighters at that time, without much technique. It marked the first time he couldn't move forward in a UFC event.
After that one, I could not come back because of dehydration.
Ken Shamrock later said he lost motivation once Royce was out of the bracket. In his mind, that was the final. What stayed with Royce wasn't the result, it was the damage. The understanding that skill doesn't always protect you. He had no real jiu-jitsu, but he almost beat me, Royce said later. Kimo wasn't polished or technical, however, he was strong enough to keep Royce under pressure for the entire fight, and that mattered more than expected. The UFC saw it the same way. That match pushed the conversation around weight classes. Yes, a 178-pound specialist could beat a 250-pound brawler, but not without consequence. Not without walking away hurt. Kimo never became a champion, and his record doesn't stand out. Still, what happened in 1994 gave him a place in the sport's history. He pushed Royce to the edge and left him unable to continue. That's what Royce remembers. The pain, risk, and most importantly, how close the fight really was. And in the number 2 spot, we have a somewhat controversial choice, and that's Kazushi Sakuraba, the Gracie Hunter. By 2000, Royce Gracie was already a central figure in MMA history. But the Pride Grand Prix in Japan offered something he hadn't faced before, a number of trained and experienced MMA partners. The opponent wasn't a random brawler or a jiu-jitsu newcomer, it was Kazushi Sakuraba, a former professional wrestler turned MMA technician. He had submitted Royce's brother, Royce Gracie, the year before. This was a huge win for Sakuraba, who wasn't well known outside of Japan. In the early MMA days, beating one of the Gracie family members meant a lot.
Sakuraba is very good.
Yeah, what do you
Very good
think about
strategy.
That's why Royce took this match personal, like Michael Jordan losing a round of golf. Royce entered the tournament not just for himself, but to defend the family's reputation. The Gracies even requested special rules, thinking it would give Royce the advantage. The match could only end by corner stoppage or physical inability to continue. Sakuraba accepted without complaint. He allowed the G, agreed to open weight, and accepted the unlimited rounds. Then he showed up and fought. The fight lasted a full 90 minutes, spanning 6 uninterrupted rounds. Sakuraba remained composed throughout, maintaining distance, targeting Royce's legs, and methodically exploiting the gi. At one point, he used Royce's belt to trap an arm, further slowing the pace. His approach was not designed to impress, but to gradually exhaust his opponent while avoiding unnecessary risk.
Very good fighter, tough as nail.
By the end of the 6th round, Royce was physically spent and visibly injured. His corner made the call to stop the fight, recognizing that he could no longer continue safely. Even years later, Royce didn't try to rewrite the history of that fight. He acknowledged what happened in the ring and what it meant. Sakuraba wasn't just another challenger, he was deliberate, unpredictable, and hard to damage. Royce didn't walk away with excuses. He walked away with a new understanding of what a complete fighter could be. They never became friends, but they never traded insults either. There was no post-fight bad blood, no tension in interviews. Sakuraba had forced Royce's corner to throw in the towel, and that moment didn't need explanation. It stood on its own. Royce respected the strategy and the toughness it took to stay calm across 6 rounds without making major mistakes. Much of the post-fight debate centered around the gi. Some critics argued it was a mistake to wear it at all. Sakuraba had used the sleeves, the collar, even the belt to control position. At one point, he trapped Royce's arm with the gi and neutralized the threat of a submission. For viewers used to clean techniques and decisive moments, it looked like a slow dismantling. But Royce didn't blame the gi. His position was consistent. Without it, he believed the damage would have been worse. Sakuraba would have landed more strikes and forced more scrambles. From Royce's perspective, control was preferable to chaos.
If he didn't have anything to hold on, he would be beating me up. He would be hitting.
The opponent simply used it better. When the fight ended, Sakuraba's reputation shifted. His performance against Royce wasn't a one-off. That string of results earned him a nickname that fans didn't give lightly, the Gracie Hunter. And Sakuraba looked good doing it. Even the fans of the Gracies couldn't help but have a soft spot for him. He didn't humiliate the family or erase what they built.
And look, I love the Gracies, and he was beating the Gracies, and we couldn't help but like him.
Their contributions to martial arts stayed intact. What he did was remove some of the mystique. He showed that Gracie Jiu-Jitsu wasn't unbeatable, and that being well-rounded mattered more than allegiance to one style. This fight changed how people viewed the Gracie style. Sakuraba didn't beat them with brute force or jiu-jitsu counters. He used pace, creativity, and strategy. Royce stuck to his system, but Sakuraba found ways to interrupt it. That forced a shift in how MMA fighters trained going forward. Specialists gave way to problem solvers. They fought again in 2007 under K1 rules.
Say the best fighter Japan ever produced.
Years later, Royce still praises him. He mentions the skill, the movement, the way Sakuraba played to the crowd without being disrespectful. Sakuraba made people laugh with his entrances and gestures. But once the bell rang, he was focused and dangerous. Royce considers him to this day one of the best to come out of Japan. His legacy didn't come from a single win. He earned it by taking on the toughest opponents available. That included multiple members of the Gracie family. Even though the Gracies are still respected today, Sakuraba helped take away the myth of invincibility. Fans started to see them as great fighters, not unbeatable ones. He came to be known as the Gracie Hunter, not because of branding, but because he kept showing up and solving a style that had dominated for years. But there was one Gracie he never fought.
They're trying to fight me, so yeah, if we see each other.
The first name on this list, Rickson Gracie. As you know, Royce comes from a storied and historic family. Royce Gracie didn't name an opponent or coach.
It's the most important family in the history of martial arts.
When asked who he respected most, he named his brother Rickson. The choice made sense, but not only because they were family.
Came out in articles and said, my brother Rickson is 10 times better than me.
Rickson represented something more, and that's discipline, precision, and control. From the beginning, Roy saw him as the most complete martial artist in their lineage. Not only did Roy look up to his older brother his entire life,
And everybody was
By 100
"What?"
times.
he was the one that actually inspired him to start thinking about professional fighting in the first place. Rickson was in the first mixed martial arts match Royce ever saw.
I couldn't get into the stadium, so I watched it.
It was a veiled Tudo match in Brazil, long before the sport had rules or structure. That moment stuck with him. Watching Rickson win through control and composure left an impression that shaped how Royce understood martial arts. Inside the Gracie family, Rickson was the standard.
He was be able the way he moved.
On the Joe Rogan podcast, Joe was wondering what made Rickson so much better than the rest of his brothers and cousins. According to Royce, it was his, in part because of God-given abilities and the fact that he trained all the time. What mattered to him was refining technique, controlling space, and understanding movement on a deeper level.
Because he was stronger, he was more athletic.
Royce watched that process for years and carried many of those values into his own fights. Rickson never entered the UFC. That decision came from Rorion, who believed Royce was the better fit to represent the family's philosophy. Royce accepted the role without resentment and gave credit to Rickson from the beginning. He wasn't trying to outshine his brother. He saw himself as the messenger. Rickson had the skills, the presence, and the experience. But he was never intended to be the face of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in the early UFC. That role was carefully assigned to Royce.
How did Rickson not get to fight in UFC 1?
He believed that showcasing the art through someone smaller and less physically imposing would have a greater impact. Rickson was already a known force in martial arts circles. Royce, by comparison, looked beatable. Royce accepted the role without hesitation. He wasn't trying to outshine his brother. He understood the plan. The family wanted to prove the system, not the individual. Rickson stayed in the background, supporting the effort while continuing to teach and compete in other settings.
That Rickson was like physically very impressive.
Royce became the public example of technique over size and strength. He won fights against larger, more muscular opponents, which amplified the effect. Even after becoming a star, Royce never claimed to be the best in the family. He kept pointing back to Rickson. That deference was consistent, even when interviewers pushed him to rank himself. He made it clear that Rickson had been the family's benchmark long before the UFC ever existed. Royce Gracie respected very few fighters, but each of these four stood for something different. Gordon Ryan showed him what the next generation of technique looked like. Kimo pushed him to the edge through sheer pressure and will. Sakuraba outsmarted him in front of the world, and Rickson was the example he never stopped chasing. These weren't casual compliments. Royce had reasons, and each of these men earned it. Which name surprised you most? Let us know in the comments. And if you want more deep dives into MMA history, make sure to subscribe.